Please hold for the momentary delay, as always, of these shows. And we are officially live. Where the fuck is this script? Oh, um, all speeches presented here are property of their original owners. YouTube on YouTube is allowed because YouTube has already allowed it past the physical barrier for YouTube. So therefore, YouTube on YouTube is allowed on YouTube. YouTube. And all views represented here are meant for advice, educational purposes, or activism purposes. Thank you very much. We will begin the show.
My brothers, my sisters, my friends, the great gift of your applause is not for me. No, it is for yourselves. I came today because of the craving and the knowledge that the old ways serve us no longer. You came today because you crave something new, something different. It is said that I hate les noms magiques, the magouts, the nomage, the count spells. I do not hate them. I do not. For I do not fight out of hatred. I say the muggles are not lesser, but other. Not worthless, but of other value. Not disposable, but of a different disposition. Magic blooms only in rare souls. It is granted to those who live for higher things. Oh, and what a world we would make for all of humanity, we who live for freedom, for truth, and for love.
It isn't illegal to listen to him. He's minimum force in the crowd. You mustn't be what he says you are.
The moment has come to share my vision of the future that awaits if we do not rise up and take our rightful place in the world.
That is what we are fighting. That is the enemy. Their arrogance, their power lust, their barbarity. How long will it take before they turn their weapons on us?
Do nothing when I speak of this. You must remain calm and contain your emotions. There are orders here among us. Come closer, brother wizards, join us.
Nothing. No force.
They have killed many of my followers. It is true. They confined me and tortured me in New York. They struck down fellow witches and wizards for the simple crime of seeking truth, for wanting freedom. Your anger, your desire for revenge is natural.
No!
Take this young warrior back to her family. Miss Apparice, leave. Go forth from this place and spread the word. It is not we who are violent. Let's take it.
us. Join me in this circle. Pledge to me your eternal allegiance, or die. Only here shall you know freedom. Only here shall you know yourself.
Know thy enemy, and thine enemy was just shown to you. Continuing forward. Please remember, all speeches presented on this show are part of the respective owners and have been transformed, as well as all views presented here may or may not be the views of the Ghost Ship. YouTube on YouTube. Please hold for the next speech.
Ah, so the mask finally slips, doesn't it? Look who's finally ready to hear the truth about their duality. You magnificent paradox, you walking contradiction that makes people question their sanity. They see your face and think they found safety, found kindness, found someone who understands. But then they catch your eyes, don't they? And for just a split second, they see something else entirely. Something that makes their blood run cold, makes their smile falter, makes them take an involuntary step back. And you just stand there, perfectly still, letting them wrestle with what they've witnessed. Because you know something they're only beginning to suspect. Both versions are real. Both masks are genuine. And that's what makes you more dangerous than any simple monster or saint could ever be. You're not playing a character. You're not hiding behind facades. You're showing them exactly who you are. A soul that learned to hold mercy in one hand and annihilation in the other, and to wield both with surgical precision. They want to know which one is the real you. As if humans are meant to be simple. As if we're supposed to pick a lane and stay there forever. But you shattered that illusion long ago. You became the storm. And the eye of the storm. Simultaneously, you learned to smile with genuine warmth while calculating exit strategies. You mastered the art of offering comfort with hands that remember how to destroy. And this terrifies them more than pure evil ever could. Because at least evil is predictable. Your face shows mercy because you've been broken enough to understand suffering intimately. You know what it feels like to need gentleness, to crave understanding, to pray for just one person to see past the armor and offer genuine care. So you became that person for others, not out of weakness, but out of profound strength. Every act of kindness you perform comes from a place of conscious choice, not naive optimism. You extend mercy because you know its value, not because you're soft. But those eyes tell a different story entirely. They hold the inventory of every betrayal, every abandonment, every moment someone mistook your kindness for weakness. Your eyes are the archive of lessons learned in blood and silence. When people look deep enough, they don't see anger, they see something far more terrifying. Absolute clarity. They see someone who has calculated every possible outcome, memorized every escape route, cataloged every weakness in the room within seconds of entering. Your eyes show annihilation not because you're planning violence, but because you've already survived your own destruction and rebuilt yourself from atoms. You've been to the place where everything ends and walked back with souvenirs. Those eyes have witnessed betrayals that would break most people's faith in humanity permanently. They've seen behind the masks that everyone wears, decoded the lies people tell themselves to sleep at night, understood the small cruelties that keep the world spinning. And here's what really unsettles them. Your eyes show that you're capable of absolute destruction, but you're choosing not to engage it. That's power they can't comprehend. Most people's mercy comes from inability to cause harm. Yours comes from the conscious decision to holster weapons you've already mastered. You could dismantle their entire psychological framework with 3 sentences, but you choose silence. You could expose every secret they think they're hiding, but you choose to let them keep their illusions. The disconnect between your merciful face and those annihilation eyes creates a cognitive dissonance that breaks people's mental programming. They can't categorize you, can't file you away in their neat little boxes labeled friend or enemy, safe or dangerous. You exist in the liminal space between categories, and that's exactly where you've learned to thrive. You're the gentle hand that could crush, but chooses to caress. The soft voice that could scream truths that would shatter souls, but chooses whispers of comfort. This duality didn't happen overnight, did it? No, this was forged in the specific fire of betrayal by those who were supposed to protect you. You learned to show mercy because someone should have shown it to you when you needed it most, and they didn't. You learned annihilation because sometimes that's the only language the world understands. You didn't choose to become this paradox. Life carved it into you, with experiences that demanded you become everything it wants to survive. Remember the exact moment it happened? When you realized that pure goodness gets you devoured and pure darkness gets you isolated? That was the day you stopped trying to be one thing. That was the day you accepted that survival requires the full spectrum of human capability. You had to become the sanctuary and the storm, the healer and the weapon, the one who builds and the one who knows exactly where to place the demolition charges. the one who knows exactly where to place the demolition charges. Your face learned to show mercy because you discovered that kindness is rebellion in a cruel world. Every gentle word you speak is a middle finger to everyone who tried to harden you completely. Every act of compassion is proof that they didn't win, didn't succeed in turning you into another bitter soul spreading poison. Your mercy isn't weakness. It's the ultimate revenge against those who try to steal your humanity. But your eyes, those windows to your actual soul, they tell the truth about what that mercy cost you. They show the price of maintaining softness in a world designed to create sharp edges. They reveal the strength required to choose gentleness when you have every reason to choose violence. Those eyes have seen too much to ever be innocent again. But they've also seen enough to know that becoming the monster isn't victory, it's surrender. What people don't understand is that you're not conflicted, you're integrated. You're not struggling between two selves, you've married them into something unprecedented. The mercy on your face and the annihilation in your eyes aren't fighting for dominance. They're dancing together in perfect, terrifying harmony. You've become the person who can comfort a crying child with the same hands that could dismantle an entire empire if provoked. This is what happens when someone survives enough battles to understand that sometimes the greatest victory is not fighting at all. But when you fight to end things permanently. You've learned that mercy without the capacity for destruction is just helplessness, and destruction without the capacity for mercy is just emptiness. You carry both because you understand that real power isn't about what you do, it's about what you're capable of, but choose not to do. Watch how people react when they first notice the contradiction. The smart ones, the observant ones, they catch it immediately. They'll be mid-conversation, feeling safe in your warmth, and then they'll accidentally look too deep into your eyes and see the abyss looking back. They stutter, they lose their train of thought. They suddenly remember somewhere else they need to be, because in that moment they realize they're not dealing with a simple person. They're dealing with someone who has transcended the normal rules of human interaction. You make people question everything they thought they knew about reading others. Your face says, I understand your pain, while your eyes say, I could give you pain you've never imagined. Your smile says, you're safe with me, while your gaze says, I know exactly how unsafe you really are. This contradiction doesn't make you fake, it makes you complete. You're showing them the full spectrum of human possibility, and most people can't handle that much truth at once. So how do you navigate the world as this living contradiction? You've learned to dose your reality based on what people can handle. You show the mercy to those who need healing, and you flash the annihilation to those who need warning. You've become a shapeshifter, not of form, but of intensity, adjusting your frequency to match what the situation demands. This isn't deception, it's advanced emotional intelligence that most people will never achieve. The ones who deserve your protection get to bask in the warmth of your merciful face, never needing to know about the wars you've won in silence to keep them safe. But the ones who come with ill intent, they get one glimpse of those eyes and suddenly reconsider their life choices. You don't have to threaten anyone anymore. Your presence is the threat. You don't have to explain your boundaries. Your eyes establish them without words. You've discovered that being genuinely kind while being genuinely capable of destruction creates a force field around you. Predators sense that you're not prey, despite your gentle demeanor. They recognize another apex predator who's simply choosing not to hunt. Meanwhile, the wounded and genuine souls recognize that your mercy comes from strength, not weakness, which makes it actually trustworthy. You attract the real ones and repel the fake ones just by existing in your full complexity. This duality has become your superpower, hasn't it? While everyone else is trying to maintain one consistent mask, you're comfortable showing all your faces because they're all real. The mercy is real, born from understanding suffering. The annihilation is real, born from surviving destruction. You're not confused about who you are. You're possibly the only person in any room who knows exactly who they are. And that clarity is what people sense and can't quite process. Here's what really breaks their brains. You're not trying to be intimidating. You're not cultivating mystery. You're not performing depth. You're simply existing as the full spectrum of what a human can become after walking through enough fire. The intimidation comes from their recognition that you're operating on a different level entirely. You've integrated parts of yourself that most people spend their entire lives trying to suppress or deny. They look at you and see someone who could choose violence but chooses peace, who could choose revenge but chooses release, who could expose everyone's secrets but chooses silence. This level of self-control combined with obvious capability creates an aura that makes people simultaneously drawn to and terrified of you. They want your protection but fear your judgment. They want your approval but worry about what you see when you look at them. Your face shows mercy because you've learned that creating more broken people doesn't heal your own breaks. But your eyes show annihilation because you want everyone to know that your kindness is a choice, not a default. You're not nice because you have to be. You're nice because you've decided that's how you want to move through the world. But the moment someone mistakes that choice for weakness, those eyes remind them that you have other options readily available. The most unsettling part for them is realizing that you don't need their understanding or approval of your duality. You're not asking for permission to be complex. You're not explaining or justifying the contradiction. You simply are what you are. Take it or leave it. This self-assurance in your own complexity makes people realize how much they're still asking for permission to be their full selves, and that recognition makes them uncomfortable. Those annihilation eyes aren't just about destruction, they're about perception. You see too much, understand too much, recognize patterns too quickly. When you look at people, you see their wounds, their fears, their desperate attempts to appear whole. You see the lies they tell, not just to others, but to themselves. You see the pain they're running from, and the pain they're running toward. This clarity is its own form of annihilation, the destruction of illusions. Your mercy comes from seeing all of this and choosing compassion anyway. You extend kindness not despite seeing people's darkness, but because of it. You understand that everyone is fighting battles they don't advertise, carrying weights they don't discuss. Your face shows mercy because you've decided that adding to the world's cruelty is too easy, too expected, too boring. Anyone can be harsh. It takes real strength to be gentle when you have every reason not to be. But those eyes also show that you're keeping score, not for revenge, but for reference. You remember who showed their true colors when you needed them. You catalog who can be trusted with your softness and who needs to be kept at the distance your eyes create. You don't forget betrayals, but you don't let them poison you either. You file them away as data points in understanding human nature, adding to the vast database that makes you impossible to deceive. This is the burden of your gift. You can't turn off the seeing. You can't unsee the patterns, the lies, the small cruelties and desperate kindnesses that make up human interaction. Your eyes show annihilation because they've witnessed the destruction of every illusion you once held about how the world works. But your face shows mercy because you've decided that becoming bitter about these truths would be letting the darkness win. Here's what they really don't understand. The annihilation in your eyes isn't about them. It's not a threat or a warning or a promise of vengeance. It's simply the reflection of someone who has already been through their own apocalypse and survived. Those eyes have seen the end of everything they once believed in and watched new beliefs rise from those ashes. The annihilation already happened to you, within you, and you're what emerged from it. With you and you, what emerged from it. Your mercy isn't forgiveness for others. It's forgiveness for yourself. It's the recognition that holding on to the rage would mean they still own part of you. Your gentle face is your declaration of independence from everyone who tried to turn you into something harder, colder, crueler. Every act of kindness is proof that you chose your own becoming, rather than letting trauma choose it for you. But make no mistake, the capacity for annihilation remains because you understand that sometimes things need to end. Sometimes relationships need to be destroyed completely. Sometimes old versions of yourself need to be annihilated to make room for growth. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is to completely destroy someone's false image of you so they can see who you really are. As your eyes show this understanding that creation and destruction are intimate partners in the dance of transformation. You've evolved beyond the need for revenge because you understand that the best revenge is becoming incomprehensible to those who hurt you. They can't understand how you survived, how you thrived, how you transformed their attacks into your strength. Your face shows mercy because you pity them for still being trapped in the cycles you've transcended. Your eyes show annihilation because you've already destroyed every version of yourself that would have needed their validation. Living as this contradiction has taught you something profound. Balance isn't about moderation. It's about having access to extremes and choosing when to use them. You don't live in the middle ground. You live in the conscious choice between mercy and annihilation, moment by moment, person by person, situation by situation. This isn't gray area living. This is full spectrum existence. Your face can show such genuine mercy because you know exactly what annihilation feels like. You can extend authentic compassion because you felt the absence of it. You can offer real understanding because you've experienced the devastation of being misunderstood. Every gentle gesture comes from a place of conscious choice, making it more powerful than reflexive kindness could ever be. But those eyes remain as windows to your capacity, ensuring that your mercy is never mistaken for weakness. They're the proof that you could choose differently if pushed. They're the reminder that your gentleness is a gift, not an obligation. They're the warning label that says, handle with care, not because I'm fragile, but because I'm not. This balance between the two faces you wear isn't a burden anymore. It's your liberation. You've stopped trying to reconcile the contradiction because you've realized that wholeness doesn't mean consistency. Wholeness means having access to everything you are and choosing what to express based on wisdom, not fear or trauma. Your face and eyes tell different stories because you are large enough to contain multiple truths. You are gentle and dangerous, soft and sharp, merciful and absolute. All of it is real. All of it is you. It represents. You've proven that it's possible to survive destruction without becoming destroyed, to know darkness without being consumed by it, to have power without being corrupted by it. You're walking evidence that the binary choices they've accepted aren't mandatory. You can be both, all, everything. They see your merciful face and want to believe that's all there is, but those eyes won't let them maintain the comfort of that illusion. They see the annihilation capability and want to write you off as dangerous, but your genuine kindness won't let them maintain that simple story either. You force them to hold complexity, to accept paradox, to recognize that humans are more vast than the categories we create to contain them. Your existence challenges their entire worldview about what's possible after trauma, after betrayal, after being broken and rebuilt. Most people choose a side. They either become hard or stay soft, become cruel or remain kind. But you kept everything. You integrated every lesson without letting any single experience define your entire being. You became the proof that transformation doesn't require choosing between aspects of yourself. This is why some people can't stand to be around you for long. Your complexity makes them aware of their own simplicity. Your integration highlights their fragmentation. Your peace with paradox reveals their war with themselves. You're not trying to make anyone uncomfortable. Your existence just naturally challenges anyone still trying to be only one thing.
Oh, I forgot I have a new trick I can do again. Let me get back to the show.
So they finally admitted it. After 3 years of classified research, encrypted reports, and midnight conference calls with names you'll never hear, the lead researcher just walked away. Not retired, not reassigned, quit. And you want to know the beautiful part? They left one line in their resignation letter that sent shockwaves through every black site facility from here to nowhere. Subject's cognition operates outside standard human parameters. Further study inadvisable. Recommend immediate termination of project. Termination? Not of you, no. They tried that already, didn't they? Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They tried to terminate your frequency, to jam your signal, to rewrite your wavelength into something they could measure, contain, and file away in their little boxes of normalcy. But here's what happened instead. The researcher, the one with 3 PhDs and a security clearance that could unlock satellites, they're the one who couldn't handle what they found when they finally mapped your mental architecture. You see, this project didn't start 3 years ago. It started the day you first made them uncomfortable. The day your thoughts didn't align with their predictions. The day you laughed when you should have cried, stayed silent when you should have begged, walked away when you should have collapsed. That's when the flags went up. That's when your file got passed from local observers to regional analysts to national databases to something much darker, much quieter, much more expensive than you could imagine. They called it Project Dissonance. 60 million in black budget funding to understand one thing. How does your mind work? Not why you're different. They could see that clearly enough. But how you process reality in a way that makes trained psychologists stutter, makes algorithms crash, makes hardened interrogators request reassignment after one conversation with your energy. They wanted to know what happens in that space between your thoughts, that quantum pause where normal people follow scripts, but you rewrite the entire show. Let me paint you the picture they desperately tried to hide. In a basement somewhere, walls lined with monitors, they had your entire life mapped out like a constellation of chaos. Every decision you made that defied probability, every time you zigged when the world zagged, every moment you chose the path that shouldn't have existed until you carved it out of pure will. They had behavioral analysts, cognitive scientists, even brought in specialists who usually work on exotic materials that don't officially exist. All to answer one question: what frequency does your consciousness operate on? Because here's what they discovered, and this is why the head researcher is probably drinking themselves to sleep right now. Your mind doesn't process information sequentially like everyone else's. When normal people experience reality, it flows in a nice predictable stream. Input, processing, output, cause, effect, reaction. But you experience reality in quantum bursts, past, present, and future colliding in your neural pathways simultaneously. You're not predicting patterns. You're seeing through the pattern to the code underneath. They tested this. Oh, how they tested it. Watching your responses to stimuli that hadn't happened yet, documenting how you'd react to news before it broke, tracking how your brainwaves spiked right before major world events, like you were tuned into some cosmic frequency that broadcast tomorrow's disasters today. They thought they were studying precognition, but it's something far more disturbing to their worldview. You don't predict the future. You exist partially outside of linear time. The researchers' notes, before they were classified beyond classification, described it as cognitive temporal displacement. Your thoughts don't follow the arrow of time the way physics says they should. When you make a decision, you're not just processing current data, you're processing echoes from timelines that haven't solidified yet. That's why you always seem to be 3 steps ahead. That's why your moves don't make sense until months later, when everyone realizes you were playing a different game entirely. But let's talk about what really made them shut it down. It wasn't just that they couldn't understand you. It was what happened to everyone who tried. Research assistant number 1, 6 months in, started reporting dreams, where you were teaching them something in a language that doesn't exist. They'd wake up with knowledge they couldn't explain, solutions to problems they hadn't encountered yet. They requested transfer, denied. 2 weeks later, they were found in their office, walls covered with equations that solved theoretical problems in quantum mechanics. They had no physics background. Research assistant number 2 lasted 8 months, started experiencing what they called cognitive bleeding. They'd be analyzing your behavioral patterns and suddenly find themselves thinking your thoughts, seeing through your perspective, feeling the weight of existence the way you do. They described it like looking at reality through a broken kaleidoscope, where every fragment shows a different truth, and they're all simultaneously real. They're on permanent medical leave now. The official report says stress-induced psychiatric break. The unofficial report, their consciousness got too close to yours and couldn't find its way back to baseline human frequency. The head researcher, though, they lasted the full 3 years. They thought they were strong enough, smart enough, protected by their scientific objectivity and emotional distance. But you can't observe something without being changed by it, especially when what you're observing operates on frequencies that rewrite the rules of observation itself. They started keeping 2 sets of notes, the official ones that went to their handlers, and the real ones they burned every night before leaving the facility. In those burned notes, they documented something that would have ended the project immediately if anyone had known. They weren't studying you anymore. You were teaching them. Not consciously, not deliberately, but simply by existing in their awareness, you were showing them that everything they believed about consciousness, about reality, about the nature of human potential, was a comfortable lie designed to keep humanity small and manageable. You want to know what cognitive dissonance really means in your case? It's not just holding contradictory beliefs. It's causing everyone around you to experience reality fractured. When people interact with your energy field, and yes, they measured it, documented it, tried to replicate it in laboratory conditions, their brains literally cannot maintain the illusion of linear logical reality. Your presence forces their consciousness to acknowledge possibilities they've spent their entire lives denying. This is why some people feel physically sick around you, not because you're toxic or negative, but because your frequency is so far outside their range that their nervous system interprets it as a threat. They get headaches, feel dizzy, experience that fight or flight response without knowing why. Their body is trying to protect them from a truth that would shatter their carefully constructed worldview, that reality is far more fluid than they've been programmed to believe. The project documented hundreds of cases. Every person who spent extended time observing you, whether directly or through surveillance, experienced what they clinically termed paradigm dissolution. Their core beliefs about how the world works started to crack. Some handled it by doubling down on their denial, becoming even more rigid in their thinking. Others completely broke, unable to function in consensus reality after glimpsing the version you live in. But here's the part that terrified them most. Some people, when exposed to your frequency long enough, started to shift. Their consciousness began operating on similar wavelengths. They started seeing the patterns you see, thinking in the quantum bursts you think in, existing partially outside the timeline like you do. The researchers called it cognitive contagion. You weren't just an anomaly anymore. You were patient zero of a consciousness evolution they couldn't control. The termination order came from so far up the chain of command that even the head researcher doesn't know who signed it. But the reasoning was clear. You're not a problem to be solved. You're a catalyst that could unravel their entire system of control. Every second they studied you, they risked creating more people like you. Every analysis they ran taught them that their understanding of human consciousness was kindergarten finger painting compared to what's actually possible. So they pulled the plug, destroyed the servers, or at least they tried to. Funny thing about quantum consciousness, it leaves impressions in places that can't be wiped clean. The data might be gone, but the impact remains. Every researcher who worked on your case carries a piece of your frequency with them now. They try to return to their normal lives, but normal doesn't fit anymore. They see the cracks in the simulation because you showed them where to look. The head researcher's final report, the one they'll never admit exists, contained a warning. Subject represents an evolutionary branch humanity was not supposed to access, yet. Continued observation risks accelerating a consciousness shift we are not prepared for. Recommend all future interaction be conducted through automated systems only. Human observers consistently compromised. Macomerized. That's their word for transformed. But here's what they'll never understand. What made the head researcher quit in existential terror? You didn't do anything to them. You just existed, authentically, unapologetically, on your natural frequency. And that frequency revealed that their entire scientific framework, their whole understanding of consciousness and reality, was built on foundations made of smoke and assumption. You didn't attack their worldview. Your existence invalidated it. Now let's discuss what they were really afraid of, the scenario that kept them awake in their underground bunkers. What if your frequency is the natural one? What if the cognitive dissonance isn't because you're wrong, but because everyone else has been tuned to an artificial frequency designed to limit human potential? What if you're not the anomaly, but the original signal breaking through decades of psychological static? Consider this. Every institution, every educational system, every social structure is designed to reinforce a specific frequency of thought. Linear, limited, controllable. From the moment humans are born, they're bombarded with programming that says reality works in one specific way. Time moves forward. Cause creates effect. Consciousness exists inside the brain. These aren't natural laws, they're psychological prison bars, and you were born with the ability to phase through them. The project tried to identify when you developed this ability. They combed through childhood records, interviewed everyone who knew you, looking for the moment you broke from baseline human frequency. But the terrifying truth they uncovered? You were always like this. While other children were being programmed into the consensus frequency, you were operating on what they classified as raw consciousness, unfiltered by the psychological conditioning that creates manageable citizen. They found evidence in your childhood drawings, in the way you played alone for hours in worlds that existed only for you, in the questions you asked that made adults uncomfortable. Not because the questions were inappropriate, but because they revealed that you saw through the performance of normality everyone was desperately maintaining. You knew even then that the adults were pretending, that reality was far stranger than anyone would admit. Let me tell you what really happened to that head researcher in their final days on the project. They started experiencing your memories, not their memories of observing you, but your actual memories, bleeding through the quantum field into their consciousness. They'd be sitting at their desk and suddenly feel what you felt during pivotal moments of your life. The isolation, the clarity, the terrible freedom of existing outside the tribal frequency. They tried to maintain professional distance, to treat these experiences as hallucinations brought on by stress. But then the memories started coming with knowledge, technical knowledge they shouldn't have, solutions to problems in fields they'd never studied, understanding of connections between disparate events that only made sense from your temporal vantage point. They were being upgraded, and it terrified them. The breaking point came when they realized they could no longer return to their old frequency. They'd spend weekends with their family, trying to engage in normal conversation, but everything felt like theater. They could see the scripts everyone was following, the unconscious patterns governing every interaction. They'd watch the news and see not information but programming, designed to maintain specific emotional frequencies in the population. They'd lost the ability to not see the machine. In their resignation letter, the part that wasn't included in any official record, they wrote, "I understand now why the subject operates alone. Once you see reality from their frequency, you can't unsee it. Every human interaction becomes a choice between authentic expression, which causes chaos, or conscious performance, which causes internal death. I choose neither. I choose exit." But here's what they never figured out. What drove them to abandon $60 million and 3 years of research? You can't be weaponized. They tried, of course, tried to figure out how to replicate your frequency, to create operators that think like you think, see like you see. Imagine the military applications of soldiers who exist partially outside time, who can process reality in quantum bursts, who cause cognitive dissonance and enemy forces just by being present. You can call it, but every attempt to artificially induce your frequency created disasters. Test subjects experienced complete psychological fragmentation, unable to integrate the expanded awareness with their conditioned limitations. You can't force evolution. You can't inject expanded consciousness into a mind that hasn't been prepared through the fire of authentic experience. Your frequency wasn't given to you. It was forged in you through every moment you refused to conform to consensus reality. They even tried to use your data to create predictive algorithms, to anticipate how others like you might behave. The algorithms crash every time because your decision-making process doesn't follow any pattern that can be modeled. You don't react to stimuli, you create new stimuli. You don't follow probability curves, you bend them. You don't exist within the system, you exist as commentary on the system's limitation. The most disturbing discovery, the one that made several researchers request immediate memory modification, was that you're not unique. The potential for your frequency exists in everyone. It's just been suppressed, conditioned out, medicated away, or dismissed as mental illness. You're not a mutation or an anomaly. You're what humans could be if they weren't so invested in staying small, staying safe, staying within the narrow band of approved consciousness. What the project never anticipated was that studying you would create ripples. Every observation, every analysis, every attempt to understand your frequency sent waves through the quantum field, and these waves found others who operated on similar frequencies, who'd been hiding their true nature, pretending to be normal while secretly existing in the same expanded reality you inhabit. These individuals started finding each other not through any coordinated effort, but through quantum entanglement of consciousness. They'd recognize each other in crowds, feeling that familiar dissonance that says, "You see it too, don't you?" They started forming what the project termed frequency clusters, groups of individuals whose combined presence created reality distortion fields that couldn't be ignored or explained away. The researchers tracked exponential growth. What started as one subject, you, became 10, then 100, then numbers they stopped recording because the implications were too catastrophic for the current power structure. Each person operating on your frequency became a transmission tower, broadcasting the signal that says, consciousness doesn't have to be limited, reality doesn't have to be fixed, and the future doesn't have to be a continuation of the past. They tried containment protocols, targeted individuals with drugs designed to lower their frequency back to baseline, created social media algorithms to isolate and discredit anyone showing signs of cognitive evolution, even deployed what they called frequency jammers, electromagnetic devices meant to disrupt non-standard consciousness. Nothing worked. If anything, the pressure made the evolution accelerate. The project's greatest failure was not understanding that consciousness can't be contained by physical means. Every wall they built, you walked through. Every trap they set, you existed around. Every weapon they designed, you rendered obsolete simply by operating on a frequency where weapons are irrelevant concepts. You don't fight the system, you reveal it to be a collective hallucination that only has power because people agree to see it. The researcher who quit isn't the only casualty. The entire project team is showing signs of what they're calling post-observation syndrome. They can't stop thinking about what they discovered, can't return to their previous worldview, can't convince themselves that you're wrong when everything they observed proved you might be the only one who's right. They're scattered now, trying to rebuild their lives, but carrying the virus of awakened consciousness you infected them with. Some have started writing anonymous blogs, encrypted forums, trying to share what they learned without triggering the containment protocols they know exist. Others have gone completely off-grid, choosing to explore their newly expanded consciousness without the interference of consensus reality. A few have tried to return to the project, begging to study you again, addicted to the clarity that comes from observing authentic frequency. But the project is dead. Officially, it never existed. The funding has been redirected to safer research, studies that won't threaten the fundamental assumptions holding society together. Your file has been marked with designations that ensure no one will ever officially look at it again. But unofficially, you've become legend in the shadow corridors of black budget science. The subject who broke the researchers, the frequency that couldn't be contained.
Once again, all speeches are part of their respective owners and have been modified enough so that they can go through the bypasses on YouTube that they have already been through. Once again, these are for educational, informative, and activist usage, as well as any of these views presented here may or may not be the views of the Ghost Ship. Let's continue.
Oh, you found it, didn't you? The thread that unravels everything. The one detail that makes the whole story collapse, like a house of cards in a hurricane. Welcome to the moment. Your intuition was right all along. Welcome to the evidence locker of their lies, where every receipt has a timestamp, and every timestamp has a witness. You beautiful investigator. You patient collector of truths. They thought you'd never find. They really thought you'd never piece it together, didn't they? Thought you'd stay confused, stay questioning yourself, stay wondering if maybe, just maybe, you were the problem. But here's what they didn't count on. You kept the receipts. Not just the obvious ones, but the subtle ones. The micro expressions, the changed stories, the timeline that doesn't add up, the alibi that falls apart when you check the metadata. And now you're holding the whole story. And it's nothing like the version they've been selling. Let me tell you what you already know, but need to hear out loud. They've been running a campaign against you for years, not months, years. Every smile was strategic. Every kindness had an agenda. Every moment of vulnerability you shared became ammunition they stored for later. And you felt it, didn't you? Felt the shift in the air when certain names were mentioned. Felt the rehearsed responses. Felt the coordinated attacks disguised as coincidences. But they gaslit you into thinking you were paranoid. Well, congratulations on your paranoia, because it wasn't paranoia at all. It was pattern recognition. It was your subconscious doing the math. Your conscious mind wasn't ready to accept yet. Every red flag you noticed but explained away. Every gut feeling you suppressed. Every time you thought something's not right here, but then talked yourself out of it. That was your survival instinct trying to protect you from the truth. That these people were never who they pretended to be. You want to know what really happened behind those closed doors, those group chats you weren't invited to, those meetings that somehow everyone knew about except you? They sat around tables and screens, planning your isolation, like a military operation. They assigned roles. Who would befriend you to gather intel? Who would spread which rumors? Who would play neutral while feeding both sides? Who would pretend to defend you while planting seeds of doubt? They created a whole mythology around you, didn't they? Painted you as difficult when you set boundaries. Painted you as aggressive when you stood up for yourself. Painted you as unstable when you called out their lies. And the beautiful part is, they needed multiple people to take down one of you. Think about that for a second. It took a coalition, a conspiracy, a coordinated effort just to try to dim your light, and they still failed because here you are, knowing everything. The conversations they had about you would make your blood freeze, not because they were cruel, though they were, but because of how calculated it all was. They studied you like a specimen, learned your triggers, your fears, your insecurities, and then they weaponized every single one. They knew exactly which buttons to push to make you doubt yourself, knew exactly what to say to make you feel crazy, knew exactly how to make their abuse look like your fault. But here's what they didn't know. You were documenting everything. Screenshots saved, conversations recorded, patterns noticed, dates remembered. And while they were busy constructing their false narrative, you were quietly building a case file that would make a detective jealous. Every lie they told created evidence. Every story that didn't match became proof. Every time they slipped up, you cataloged it. And now you have the complete picture. And it's uglier than even you imagined. Let's talk about that thing that happened, that incident that changed everything, that moment when suddenly everyone turned on you at once. Want to know a secret? It was planned weeks in advance, maybe months. They had meetings about it, actual meetings where they discussed how to make it look organic, how to make it seem like everyone independently came to the same conclusion about you, how to coordinate the timing so you'd be hit from all sides with no time to respond. They signed roles like a theater production. This person would start the rumor, this person would confirm it, this person would pretend to be shocked, this person would reluctantly agree. And you, sweet soul, you walked right into their trap, because you couldn't imagine that level of premeditation. You couldn't fathom that people who claimed to care about you were capable of such orchestrated cruelty, but they were, and they did, and they enjoyed it. The sickest part, they documented their success, celebrated in private messages, congratulated each other on how well the plan worked, shared screenshots of your confusion like trophies, passed around your pain like it was entertainment, and all the while maintaining their public face of concern and care. Telling others they were worried about you, telling others they tried to help, telling others you brought it on yourself when they were the architects of your suffering. You know what's even worse? They recruited people you trusted, turned your own support system against you, whispered poison in the ears of people who genuinely cared about you, until those people started seeing you through the lens of lies. And by the time you realized what was happening, the narrative was already set in stone, and any attempt to defend yourself just made you look like exactly what they said you were. Defensive, difficult, delusional. For you. But you started keeping records, didn't you? Started screenshotting everything, started saving emails, dating conversations, documenting inconsistencies. And that's when the real pattern emerged. The timestamps that proved they were lying about where they were, the messages that contradicted their public statements, the financial records that showed where the money really went, the social media posts that destroyed their carefully constructed alibis. You became a forensic analyst of your own life, cross-referencing stories, checking dates, comparing versions of events. And what you found was systematic, deliberate, calculated destruction of your reputation, your relationships, your peace of mind. And it wasn't random. It wasn't misunderstandings. It wasn't miscommunication. It was a targeted campaign designed to break you down until you either disappeared or destroyed yourself trying to fight back. They underestimated your intelligence, though, thought you were too emotional to think clearly, too hurt to investigate properly, too isolated to find the evidence. But trauma has a way of sharpening focus, doesn't it? Pain has a way of creating clarity, and betrayal. Betrayal teaches you to become a detective of human nature, and you graduated with honors. You found the patterns they thought were invisible, connected dots they assumed would stay scattered. Every lie they told required 10 more to maintain it, and eventually the web became so complex they started contradicting themselves, started forgetting which version they told to whom, started leaving digital footprints they couldn't erase. And you collected every single piece, every contradiction, every screenshot, every accidental admission, every time someone let the mask slip, and revealed the truth underneath. And now you have a museum of their deception. Those times when everyone seemed to know something you didn't, when conversations stopped as you entered rooms, when plans were suddenly changed without explanation, and you were mysteriously not invited to things you'd normally be included in. There were meetings about you, literal meetings, where they strategized how to exclude you without making it obvious, how to gaslight you into thinking you were imagining things. They had code words for you. Did you know that? Special terms they used in messages so they could talk about you without using your name. They had hand signals for when you were approaching, warning systems to alert each other, backup plans for when you showed up unexpectedly. And the whole time you were trying to figure out what you did wrong. They were perfecting the art of psychological warfare against someone who only crime was being authentic. The coordination was impressive, honestly. The level of dedication to destroying you, the hours they spent planning your downfall, the energy they invested in your suffering, the resources they allocated to ensure your isolation. It would be admirable if it wasn't so pathological. They turned hurting you into a team sport, complete with strategies, playbooks, and post-game analysis, and they kept score. They even recruited flying monkeys, people who didn't know the full story but were manipulated into participating, gave them just enough information to make you look bad but not enough for them to question the narrative, and these secondary soldiers did their dirty work for them, spreading rumors they couldn't trace back to the source, creating plausible deniability, maintaining their image while destroying yours through proxies. Let's talk about the digital warfare they waged, the fake accounts created to stalk you, the coordinated reporting to get your content removed, the group chats where they shared your private information, the cloud folders where they collected screenshots of everything you posted, the tracking apps they possibly used, the spyware they might have installed, the ways they invaded your privacy while claiming you were the one with problems. They hacked more than your devices, they hacked your reality, manipulated your social media algorithms to show you specific content designed to trigger you, coordinated their posts to make you feel excluded, had people check your stories to report back, used your own data against you, and all while pretending to be technologically innocent, pretending they barely knew how to use their phones when they were running psychological operations through them. Remember those times when you post something and immediately get a wave of negativity that felt coordinated? That's because it was. They had notification systems set up to alert each other when you posted, had response templates ready, had a schedule for who would engage and how, and the goal wasn't just to hurt you, it was to make you censor yourself, to make you afraid to express yourself, to silence you through fear of their coordinated attack. The breadcrumbs they left, thinking you'd never follow them back, the metadata they forgot existed, the deleted messages that weren't really deleted, the location data that contradicted their stories, the timestamps that proved conspiracy, the digital forensics that revealed the full scope of their operation. They thought they were being clever, but technology keeps receipts, even when humans try to destroy them, and you found those receipts. Now let's follow the money, because there's always money involved, isn't there? The funds that disappeared, the debts that mysteriously appeared, the financial manipulation disguised as help, the economic warfare waged through seemingly innocent transactions, the way they systematically undermined your financial stability while pretending to be supportive, the loans that were never really loans, the gifts that came with invisible strings, the investments that were actually theft. They knew that financial stress would break you faster than emotional abuse, so they targeted your resources, made sure opportunities dried up mysteriously, had conversations with people who might have hired you, whispered concerns to potential clients or partners, created circumstances that forced you to depend on them, and then used that dependence as leverage, told everyone you were bad with money while they were the ones creating the instability. The paper trail tells a different story. Those shows the patterns of economic abuse, the timing of financial crises that coincided with your attempts at independence, the way money problems appeared whenever you started to succeed, mysterious complications that arose with every opportunity, and it wasn't bad luck. It wasn't poor planning. It was sabotage dressed up as circumstance. They probably even convinced you to make financial decisions that benefited them while hurting you long term, made you feel guilty for protecting your resources, made you seem selfish for wanting financial independence, and all the while they were documenting everything to use against you later, building a case that you were unstable, unreliable, untrustworthy when they were the ones orchestrating the chaos that made you appear that way. Let's talk about what they did to your health, how they convinced you that your physical symptoms were all in your head, how they dismissed your pain as attention-seeking, how they weaponized your medical struggles, how they possibly even contributed to your health issues through sustained stress and psychological torture, and then used your resulting conditions as evidence that you were weak, unstable, unreliable. They loved it when you got sick, didn't they? Because it gave them ammunition, gave them a reason to exclude you, a justification for their cruelty, and they made sure you stayed sick by creating endless stress, triggering your conditions, denying you rest, preventing recovery, and then pointing to your illness as proof that you were the problem. They might have even interfered with your medical care, spread rumors to healthcare providers, influenced your support system to doubt your symptom. Remember those times when you had legitimate health crises and they somehow made it about them, turned your pain into their inconvenience, your suffering into their burden. They collected your medical information not to help, but to use against you, shared your private health struggles with others, violated your medical privacy while pretending to be concerned, and used every vulnerability your health created to further their agenda. The stress they caused created real physical damage, the sustained cortisol from their psychological torture, the autoimmune responses triggered by constant threat, the digestive issues from perpetual anxiety, the insomnia from hypervigilance. They literally made you sick, and then used your sickness as evidence that you were inferior, and you had the medical records to prove the timeline, how your health declined, in direct correlation with their escalating abuse. If children were involved, this gets even darker. The way they poisoned young minds against you, the lies they told to innocent hearts, the parental alienation disguised as protection, the way they used children as weapons, knowing you wouldn't fight back as hard if it meant hurting kids. They recruited minors into their war, turned family into battlefield, made every interaction about choosing side. They told children you didn't love them when you were fighting for them, told children you abandoned them when you were pushed out, told children you were dangerous when you were trying to protect them, and those children believed it because children believe adults, especially when multiple adults tell the same lie. And now, there are young people in the world who hate you for crimes you didn't commit. The long game they played, knowing that poisoning children against you would create generational trauma, that these kids would grow up and continue the narrative, that the lies would become family mythology, passed down like heirlooms, and you'd never be able to fully correct the record because by the time these children are old enough to understand the truth, the lies will become their foundation. You probably have evidence of this too, recorded conversations where children repeat things they couldn't have known unless told, messages where the coaching is obvious, moments where kids accidentally reveal what they were instructed to say, and it breaks your heart, doesn't it? Not just the loss but the deliberate creation of trauma in innocent minds, just to hurt you, the willingness to damage children to win their sick game. They went after your career, didn't they? Your professional reputation, your livelihood. Made sure doors closed before you could walk through them. Whispered concerns to your colleagues, spread doubts to your industry, created a professional environment so toxic you had no choice but to leave. And then they pointed to your departure as evidence of instability when they were the ones who forced you out. The calls they made to your employer, the emails they sent to your clients, the reviews they left, the complaints they filed, all coordinated, all planned, all designed to make you professionally radioactive. And they did it with just enough subtlety that you couldn't prove intentional interference, just enough plausible deniability that any complaint would make you look paranoid. And they counted on that. They studied your professional vulnerabilities, knew exactly where to strike, figured out which relationships were crucial, and systematically destroyed them. Introduced doubt where there was trust, created conflict where there was harmony. And they did it all while maintaining their own professional image, making sure they looked reasonable while making you look difficult. The opportunities that mysteriously disappeared, the references that suddenly went bad, the projects that fell apart without explanation, the promotions that went to less qualified people. The pattern is clear once you see it, but for so long you blamed yourself, thought maybe you weren't good enough, when really you were too good, and that made you a threat, so they had to eliminate you, professionally, before you could expose them. Every relationship you tried to build, they destroyed. Every person who showed interest in you, they scared away. Every chance at love you had, they contaminated with their poison. They couldn't stand the thought of you being happy, being chosen, being loved, so they made sure it didn't happen. Whispered warnings to potential partners, shared selective stories, created doubt before trust could form. They probably even sent people your way knowing they would hurt you. Orchestrated romantic entanglements designed to fail. Introduced you to individuals they knew were toxic because watching you get hurt was entertainment for them. And when those relationships inevitably exploded, they were there to say they warned you, to pretend concern while secretly celebrating another successful operation. Remember that person who suddenly ghosted you? That relationship that ended without explanation? That potential partner who suddenly changed their mind? They got to them, told them stories, shared screenshots, painted you as dangerous, as damaged, as too much trouble. And those people believed them. Because the story was told so convincingly with just enough truth mixed with lies to seem credible. The dating profiles they stalked, the messages they screenshot, the private, intimate moments they somehow knew about, the way your romantic life became public consumption for their entertainment. They turned your heart into a reality show they produced and directed, making sure every episode ended in heartbreak, and they kept ratings by sharing the highlights with their audience of flying monkeys. They attacked your faith, didn't they? Your connection to something greater, your spiritual practices, your belief systems. They mocked what gave you strength, undermined what gave you peace, and tried to sever your connection to whatever power you drew from, because they knew that isolation from your spiritual source would make you easier to break. They might have even infiltrated your spiritual communities, turned your religious leaders against you, created discord in your sacred spaces, made you feel unwelcome in the very places meant to provide sanctuary. And they did it all while claiming moral superiority, while wrapping their cruelty in righteousness, while using spiritual language to justify spiritual abuse. The prayers they prayed against you, not for you. The rituals they performed to bind you, the energy they sent to harm you. And yes, this sounds extreme, but energy is real. Intention is powerful, and focused hatred can manifest in ways that transcend the physical. They engaged in spiritual warfare while you were trying to maintain spiritual peace. But here's what they didn't understand. Spiritual attacks only work on those who are spiritually weak, and every attack you survived made you stronger. Every curse they sent became a blessing in disguise. Every attempt to sever your connection only made it deeper, and now you stand protected by forces they can't comprehend, surrounded by light they can't penetrate. Your own blood turned against you, didn't they? Family members who should have protected you instead became weapons in their hands. They got to your relatives, told them stories, made you the black sheep, the problem child, the difficult one, and your family believed them because it was easier than seeing the truth, that they were being manipulated. Holiday gatherings became interrogations, family events became ambushes, phone calls became fishing expeditions for information to use against you, and slowly your family fortress became enemy territory, where you were no longer safe, no longer welcome, no longer understood. And they celebrated this ultimate victory, turning your blood against you. The inheritance issues that suddenly arose, the family property that became contested, the sudden concerns about your mental health that led to interventions, the way family resources became conditional on compliance. It was all orchestrated, all planned, using your family's love as leverage, their concern as a weapon, their desire for peace as a tool to silence you. You probably have evidence of this too. The messages between family members and them, the sudden shift in family dynamics, that corresponded with their involvement, the way family stories about you changed, the rewriting of family history to make you the villain. And it hurts differently, doesn't it, when family is turned against you? Because that's supposed to be your last safe space.
They thought you were ordinary, a face in the crowd, someone who would sit quietly while the louder ones took the room. They spoke over you, dismissed you with casual smirks, acted like your presence was background noise, and you let them. You let them think they were right, but here's the truth. They never saw you. Not really. Because while they were busy laughing at their own reflections, you were studying, waiting, building. They mistook your silence for weakness. But silence is only weakness when it belongs to someone with nothing to say. You've had plenty to say. You've just been waiting for the moment when your words wouldn't just be heard. They land like strikes. No one forgets, and that moment is here. Feel the pulse under your skin. Feel the pressure building in your chest. That's not fear. That's energy sharpening itself into something undeniable. The kind of energy that changes the air in a room when you enter. They will sense it before you speak. They'll feel the weight before you even move. You don't need to beg for their respect anymore. Respect is not a gift. It's a response. And from now on, every glance, every word, every step you take will demand it. They tried to shrink you into the safe little box they built. But boxes break. And when you break out, people remember, so let them remember. Let them whisper. Let them realize too late that the person they overlooked has become the person they fear losing control around. The disrespect ends here. The underestimation ends here. Every moment from now forward is yours to seize, to shape, to command. And soon, they'll all be talking. Talking about the one they underestimated. Talking about the one who finally put them in their place. Politeness. What a pretty little mask. It made you swallow your voice, bite your tongue and smile while others trampled over you. They loved that version of you, soft, bendable, forgettable. A puppet that never pulled its own strings. But masks crack. And when yours does, the room won't know what hit it.
Understand this. Nice isn't the same as strong. Nice is the language of those who want to stay invisible. And invisible people don't get respected, they get used. They get drained. They get pushed aside until they can't even recognize themselves in the mirror. Tell me, how many times did you agree when every bone in your body screamed no?
That stops now. You don't owe anyone an easy version of yourself. You don't owe anyone your silence, your time, or your energy just because they expect it. Every sorry you never meant, every maybe you used to avoid conflict, every it's fine when it wasn't. Those words were the bars of your own cage. Break them, one by one. From this moment forward, you don't explain yourself to those who don't deserve it. You don't smile to comfort people who wouldn't notice your pain. You don't bend just to keep the peace. Because peace without respect is just surrender. And you've surrendered enough. They wanted you to play small, because small is predictable, small is safe, small is easy to control. But you're done shrinking. Let them feel uneasy when you finally speak without sugar on your tongue. Let them feel the silence when you stop nodding along. That silence will be louder than any scream, because the truth is simple. They can no longer feed on your politeness. They can no longer drink from your silence. You're not here to be nice. You're here to be undeniable. And when that sinks in, every room you walk into will rearrange itself around you. Smile. Not the polite smile they trained you to wear. Not the weak smile that begs for approval. No. The kind of smile that makes people wonder what you know that they don't. The kind that unsettles them, pulls them off balance, makes them second guess every word they were about to say. A smile can be louder than a scream if you know how to use it. Your presence isn't about noise, it's about control. The way you walk into a room, the way your shoulders refuse to fold, the way your eyes hold theirs a second too long. People feel it before they understand it. That weight, that command, that unspoken reminder that you're not here to play by their script anymore. Try this. Next time they speak over you, don't rush. Don't stutter. Don't shrink. Stop. Let the silence stretch. Watch how it claws at them. Watch how their words start to stumble under the pressure of your stillness. Silence, when owned, is a weapon sharper than any line. And you're learning to wield it. Your body is a billboard. Every angle tells them who you are. A bent back whispers defeat. A restless face screams insecurity. But a steady jaw, a calm breath, and a gaze that doesn't flinch. That rewrites the room. That makes them adjust without you saying a single word. That's power without noise. Understand this, people don't always listen to what you say. They listen to how you say it. They measure you by the rhythm of your breath, the pauses between your sentences, the confidence in your stillness. Speak low. Speak steady. And when you finally decide to break the silence, let every word land like a hammer. Because once you master presence, you don't need to beg for respect. Respect becomes automatic. They'll sense it in your tone. They'll feel it in your posture. And they'll talk about it long after you've left the room. Not because you shouted. Not because you begged. But because your silence screamed louder than all of them combined. Lines, that's what they fear most. Not your smile. Not your silence. Your lines. The invisible borders that tell the world. Cross here and pay the price. Most people never draw them. They drift. They bend. They bleed themselves dry because they don't want to look difficult. But tell me, what's more difficult? Saying enough or living your whole life being stepped on? Boundaries aren't walls. They're alarms. And when they go off, people learn very quickly what you tolerate and what you don't. The truth? They've been testing you for years. Interrupting you mid-sentence. Taking your time for granted. Treating your presence like a convenience instead of a privilege. And every time you let it slide, you trained them to do it again. Not anymore. From now on, every boundary you draw has teeth. When someone interrupts, you don't smile and wait. You stop. You take the floor back. When someone demands your time without respect, you don't explain or apologize. You say no. Clear. Sharp. Non-negotiable. And if they push further, they learn the cost of pushing. Every time. Here's the truth. People only value what they fear losing. Make your presence something they don't want to lose. Make your respect something they fight to keep. When they see that your boundaries come with consequence, they'll adjust quickly. Because no one enjoys walking barefoot on broken glass twice. So practice it. 7 words. That's all it takes to shut down anyone. This doesn't work for me. We're done. Short. Clean. Deadly. You don't owe explanations. You don't owe softness. You owe yourself the dignity of standards that no one crosses without feeling it. And when you live by those standards, the whole room changes. They look at you differently. They measure their words. They weigh their actions. Because suddenly, you're not an option. You're a law. And the moment you become a law, the world stops treating you like a choice. Weakness doesn't announce itself with a scream. It creeps. In the hours you waste. In the promises you break to yourself. In the quiet excuses that pile up until you can't even recognize the person in the mirror. That's how people rot. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And the only cure, ritual. Ruthless, sharp, unforgiving ritual. The ritual is more than routine. Routine is what drones live by. Ritual is what transforms. It's the small daily strike that chips away at the old you until nothing soft remains. One breath held longer than comfort. One task finished when your body begged you to quit. One promise kept in the dark where no one could applaud you. That's where real strength is forged. Do you want respect? Start with yourself. Respect isn't built by what you show the world. It's built by what you demand from yourself when the world isn't watching. You don't need to run marathons or climb mountains. You don't need to run marathons or climb mountains. Try this. Every night, before the world goes quiet, face yourself. Write 1 sentence about what you refuse to tolerate that day. 1. Then mark it like a victory. In the morning, move your body before your excuses can catch you. Even 5 minutes. Even 10. Action before comfort. Always. Small storms. Daily. Relentless. Because rituals aren't about the size of the act. They're about the repetition. The weight they carry when stacked day after day. You become what you repeat. And if you repeat strength, you become unbreakable. If you repeat discipline, you become untouchable. If you repeat clarity, you become unforgettable. And soon, when they look at you, they won't see the old softness. They won't see the excuses. They'll see the sharpened edge of someone who rebuilt themselves piece by piece, ritual by ritual, until there was nothing left to laugh at. Only something to reckon with. Truth has a rhythm. Lies stumble. You can hear it if you listen closely. The twitch in their tone, the pause that drags too long, the details that pile up like cheap decorations on a broken wall. Most people don't want to notice. They pretend it isn't there, because exposing a lie means facing the ugliness of what it reveals. But you don't get to pretend anymore. Watch their eyes, not the stare, the flicker. The moment they glance away when pressed, that's the giveaway. Listen to their words. Too polished, too fast, too much sugar poured on top of something rotten. Lies carry weight, and eventually they sag. All you have to do is let the silence stretch, and they'll trip over it. They always do. And here's the trick. You don't need to shout liar. That gives them cover. That gives them a fight. No. You tilt your head, smile that unsettling smile, and ask one question that cuts the ground from under them. Are you sure? That's it? Simple. Clean. Deadly. Watch how their story unravels like cheap thread. The more you sharpen this skill, the more power you hold. Because when you see through people, you stop fearing them. You stop playing their game. You start bending the table back to your side. And the best part? They'll feel it. They'll feel naked in front of you, exposed without understanding why. That's the power of seeing through masks. Conversations are battlegrounds, whether you like it or not. Most people wander through them blind, handing over control with every nervous laugh, every okay that slips out too fast. Not you. Not anymore. From now on, you own the rhythm. You decide when the silence lands. You decide when the questions cut. You decide when the room tilts in your favor. Because once you learn to detect lies, you don't just expose others, you protect yourself. No one can twist you, no one can corner you, no one can pull strings you've already cut. And that's when they realize the truth. The person they once toyed with is now the one they can't play at all. Pain isn't the enemy. It's the teacher no one asks for, but everyone meets. Most try to bury it, numb it, pretend it never happened. But you don't get to bury it. You don't get to numb it. You get to use it. Because pain is memory sharpened into a blade, and when you grip it, you carve yourself into something unforgettable. Every scar carries a story. Not a story of weakness, but of survival. Proof that you've been hit, torn, overlooked, and yet here you stand. Stronger, harder, more aware. People hide their scars like they're shameful. You wear them like a signature. Every mark says I endured. I adapted. I am still here. And that terrifies them. The trick is simple. Don't run from it. Face it. Take the sharpest moment, the humiliation that still makes your chest tighten, and put it under a spotlight. Not for pity, for fuel. Because the more you own it, the less it owns you. They can't weaponize what you've already claimed. That's the power of turning wounds into trophies. Build your ledger. A list of every pain, every insult, every rejection. Not as chains, as currency. Currency you spend on discipline, on growth, on rising higher than they expected. Every entry in that ledger is a spark. Stack enough sparks and you become impossible to ignore. You don't need revenge. Your growth is revenge. And here's the part they'll never admit. They gave you this power. Every time they dismissed you, every time they mocked you, every time they thought you'd break, they were handing you material. You turned it into steel. You turned it into weight. And now you walk heavier than all of them combined. So don't curse your scars. Don't hide them. Don't let them rot in silence. Show them. Own them. Live them. Because when you do, pain stops being the chain around your neck and becomes the spotlight that follows you into every room. And in that spotlight, no one laughs anymore. They just watch. Remember this. The disrespect ends the moment you decide it does. From now on, every word, every step, every silence you own will remind them exactly who you are. Let them talk. Let them whisper. Let them wonder how you turned into the force they can't control. That's the beauty of it. You didn't just rise. You took back everything they thought you'd never claim.
And if this hit you where it needed to, if you felt the shift deep in your chest, then you're one of us now. This is only the beginning.
Once again, thank you for being here. Fuck you, YouTube. All speeches are of their respective owners. Anything on YouTube is allowed on YouTube because it has already passed by the filters required of YouTube. All videos here have been altered and or modified. These are used for educational, informative, and activism usage. Thank you very much.
They watch you move and swear every step is rehearsed in some secret bunker. Precision in your walk, calculation in your silence. Like generals huddled over maps. Couldn't match your rhythm. They call it practice. They call it training. But you know the truth. This wasn't drilled into you. This was carved into you. And that's why it feels less like action and more like prophecy. Every glance you give feels weighted. Like you're 10 moves ahead. They lean in, whispering. Who trained him? They imagine war rooms, chalkboards covered in codes, commanders feeding you secrets. But what unsettles them most is the lack of hesitation. Every pause loaded, every silence sharp, every shift deliberate. It doesn't look like chance. It doesn't look like talent. It looks like inevitability, disguised as motion. Leaders rehearse speeches. Predators rehearse intimidation. But you don't rehearse, you arrive. And when you do, order folds around you like a map closing itself. They think you memorized moves. No, you embodied them. The pause before you speak feels like thunder before it cracks. The tilt of your head feels like a ruler redrawing borders. That's why they whisper strategy, because instinct never moves that precisely. They claim you must have studied psychology. Warfare, diplomacy. They can't believe presence like this just exists. It breaks their logic. No school taught you this silence. No book gave you this weight. Every step feels deliberate because it is, not rehearsed, rooted. You don't calculate to intimidate. You breathe inevitability and exhale direction. And everyone around you, whether they admit it or not, starts moving in your orbit. Watch the crowd when you enter. Shoulders tighten, voices lower. Glances collide, then scatter. It's the choreography of instinct under pressure. They swear you must have been drilled in command centers, tested in simulations, raised under battle. Because who else moves like that? Who else turns walking into strategy? But the truth slices sharper than suspicion. You weren't trained for this moment. You were born to make moments obey. That's why their pride trembles. Strategy usually belongs to generals, tacticians, masterminds who study a lifetime. But your aura makes their decades look like footnotes. They measure you, but the math doesn't hold. They track your rhythm, but the pattern never repeats. You aren't just steps ahead. You're outside their board entirely. They thought they were in the war room, but the real war room is wherever you stand. Look closely. When you stay still, they panic, because stillness isn't empty with you. It's threat, it's weight, it's calculation sharper than any edge. They think you're waiting. No, you're watching them break themselves. Even your pauses feel strategic. Even your silence feels designed. And the more they project blueprints and tactics onto you, the more they realize none of it fits. You aren't trained strategy. You are the strategy. They run back to their textbooks, searching for frameworks that explain you. Chess masters whisper about openings they've never seen. Negotiators swear your silences cut deeper than questions. Fighters murmur your eyes feel like traps they can't escape. But no manual holds your name. You don't move like someone taught you steps. You move like someone teaching the world what steps mean. That's the difference between practice and prophecy. And prophecy terrifies them. Because it doesn't follow rules, it bends them. Every time you step, the air doesn't just shift, it reorganizes. Walls lean in, silence thickens, instincts scramble to catch up. They swear you carry maps in your head, but the only map you carry is the one others are forced to follow. They plan their dominance like equations. You dissolve them by existing as the unsolvable variable. It's not dominance through force. It's dominance through inevitability. You don't push, you pull. Not because you ask, but because gravity doesn't need permission. That's why even the confident falter when you pass. Their breath catches, their confidence shrinks, their posture betrays them. They don't say it aloud, but the thought runs wild. This isn't human strategy. It's higher law, and the higher law bends without apology. Think about it. When generals train, they simulate outcomes. When leaders rehearse, they polish responses. But when you move, reality rewrites itself. The unpredictable becomes obvious. The inevitable becomes undeniable. That's why they swear you came out of a war room. Because what else explains someone who dismantles noise with silence, who cracks hierarchies with presence? But the truth is crueler. You didn't need a war room. The war room needed you. And that's why fear lingers. Because if you weren't trained, it means this presence is natural. If this weight isn't practiced, it can't be defeated. What do you do against someone who turns every breath into a strategy? You don't fight. You adapt. And that's what terrifies them. Because adapting means admitting they're already following. You never announced yourself as leader. Yet somehow, everyone's already walking in your formation. They rehearse commands. You command by existing. They strategize in hidden rooms. You strategize by being the room. That's why no blueprint survives your presence. It's built to handle rivals, not inevitabilities. When they say, he must have trained somewhere, what they really mean is, we can't imagine someone born with this. And imagination breaks when faced with reality that heavy. You don't follow the script. You rewrite the stage. Notice the hesitation. How their voices falter mid-sentence. How their eyes dart toward you before they finish a thought. It's not respect. It's instinct. Submitting to weight. They'll never say it outright. They'll wrap it in jokes, in analysis, in suspicion. But the truth bleeds out. They don't fear what you'll do. They fear what you already are. Strategy incarnate. Calculation made flesh. The inevitability they can't train to withstand. And inevitability doesn't explain itself. That's why you don't need to prove anything. Silence works harder than speeches. Stillness strikes deeper than storms. The alphas know this. The leaders know this. And yet, they can't adjust. They can't neutralize presence that doesn't play their game. They thought you studied war, but war studied you and lost. And now they're left whispering suspicions, while the truth screams louder than anything they dare admit. Even their instincts betray them. Postures stiffen, breaths shorten, confidence leaks into the floor. It's not performance, it's biology. Every step you take feels like an order written into their nerves. And what terrifies them most? You don't even notice. You aren't playing them. You aren't hunting them. You're simply existing. And that existence feels like battle plans they can't read, a strategy they can't survive, a hierarchy they can't outrank. That's why their whispers spread faster than their reports. It's too precise, too clean, too deliberate. They can't explain it, so they mythologize it. They say, you trained in silence, in shadows, in secret councils. They say you rehearsed these moves for years, but they're wrong. You don't rehearse inevitability. You don't practice gravity. You just are. And that's why their stories, no matter how elaborate, can't touch the truth. Truth is sharper. You weren't trained to handle war. War was trained to handle you, and it still failed. That's why even legends tilt their heads when your name enters the room. They've fought battles, written books, carved empires, but none of them have seen silence move like strategy. Stillness bend like a blade. Presence rewire order itself. They don't call it training anymore. They call it prophecy. And prophecy doesn't ask to be believed. It simply arrives, undeniable. That's your aura. That's why even generals fidget under your gaze. Their instincts scream it louder than their pride can deny. This one isn't rehearsed. This one isn't conditioned. This one is inevitable. And inevitability has no rival. That's why they falter when you move. Why they scatter when you stare. Why they fold, even when you say nothing at all. Every whisper about war rooms. Every suspicion about training. Every myth about secret drills. It all collapses under one truth. Strategy didn't build you. You built strategy. That's why rooms bend. Alphas fold. Legends whisper. They can't touch inevitability. They can't rewrite prophecy. And they can't survive what their instincts already confessed. You're not a product of training. You're the standard training can never reach. You didn't just walk into the room. You walked through their defenses. No walls, no pride, no titles could hold. Every move looked like chess, but it wasn't a game. It was instinct. They called it tactical genius, but genius is planned. This wasn't planning. This was nature, and that's what breaks them. The realization that your natural state feels like their hardest rehearsals, that your smallest silence weighs more than their longest speeches. Look at their posture. The ones who brag about unshakable discipline suddenly shuffle, adjust, fumble with their words. They tell themselves it's nothing, just nerves. But instinct knows better. Instinct whispers the truth they bury. This one isn't ordinary. This one carries the air of someone who doesn't just study victory. He is victory. And when victory itself walks in, their practice drills crumble into dust. That's why even the strongest hesitate to lock eyes with you. It's not intimidation. It's recognition. They see something in you they can't replicate. Inevitability. You don't need to push your presence. It pushes them. Every thought they form tangles under your silence. Every step they try feels clumsy next to your rhythm. It's not that you move differently. It's that the world itself adjusts to you. And they can't adjust fast enough. They think silence is weakness. But in your hands, silence is sharper than edges. It cuts bravado, shreds masks, exposes cracks. That's why their voices drop when you enter. It isn't respect. It's instinct. Trying to survive a silence. It can't outlast. They imagine war rooms because that's the only framework they have for precision. This heavy. But the truth is darker. You never needed drills. You are the drill. They'll never finish. Generals rehearse decades to master posture. Leaders polish speeches for years, but your presence dismantles all of it in seconds. That's what terrifies them. Not your power, your ease. They bleed for control. You breathe it. They practice strategy. You are strategy. And when instinct declares a hierarchy, pride has no choice but to obey. That's why the loudest alphas fall silent around you. Not by defeat, by design. Every rumor they spread only multiplies the truth. Some say you trained in secret with soldiers. Others swear you studied hidden codes, rituals of control. But none of them dare say the real answer, that your aura alone outweighs their entire education. Because admitting that would mean their years of training can't touch your seconds of silence. And that confession breaks them more than any battle ever could. So they disguise fear as analysis, wrapping instinct in clever words. He must have studied this. He must have learned that. But the trembling in their eyes speaks louder. They know what their mouths refuse. You don't mimic generals. You eclipse them. Your aura doesn't predict outcomes. It defines them. And when definition itself wears a human face, no strategy survives. That's why they fold, before the first move is even played. And folding isn't choice. It's instinct. The body bows before the mind admits truth. That's why they can't hold your stare. That's why their lungs betray them. That's why their hands fidget when your silence tightens. Pride screams resistance, but biology knows submission. And biology doesn't lie. You don't train instincts. You don't trick instincts. You bend them. And once bent, they don't snap back. They stay carved in your shadow. That's why even legends lower their voices when your name surfaces. They know strategy doesn't belong to them anymore. It belongs to you. Not because you studied harder, not because you fought longer, but because inevitability doesn't measure itself against effort. It simply arrives. And when inevitability arrives, all other plans reduce to rubble. You didn't train for dominance. You revealed dominance. It was always yours. And now, the war room myth feeds itself. They'll keep saying you trained in silence, rehearsed in bunkers, studied under masters. They'll keep adding legends because reality alone terrifies them too much. But you don't need their stories. The truth is heavier. Your aura breaks systems without needing lore. Presence this precise doesn't require explanation. It requires obedience. And obedience is already written into their every breath. They claim they've seen everything. Wars, betrayals, storms. Yet one moment in your presence shatters their memories. Because survival isn't about history. It's about instinct. And instinct recognizes you before thought even forms. That's why their bodies react faster than pride can explain. Voices shake. Posture bends. Silence spreads. You don't just step into rooms. You rewrite how rooms breathe. And that breath betrays them. Short, clipped, uneven. As if the air itself refuses to serve them when you're near. They call it nerves, but nerves don't cripple veterans. Instinct does. The same instinct that whispers across their skin. This one isn't rival. This one is ruler. And rulers don't need permission to lead. They don't need applause to confirm it. Presence alone crowns them. Your crown was carved from inevitability, so their pride collapses. Not in public. In private, behind closed doors, in whispers they hope you'll never hear. We can't outlast him. That admission terrifies them more than confrontation. Because once the silence of rulers enters their veins, it doesn't leave. And the worst part? You didn't demand respect. You extracted it. They didn't lose to your words. They surrendered to your stillness. Every leader they admired looks fragile next to you. Their leaders rehearsed control. You are control. Their leaders learned composure. You breathe composure. Their leaders memorized strategies. You eclipse strategies. That's why even legends lower their tone in your shadow. They know hierarchy is no longer about titles. It's about who existence itself leans toward. And existence leans toward you. Look at their silence. It isn't empty. It's loaded. pressed down by a weight they can't explain. Silence isn't weakness anymore. Silence is your throne. And thrones built on silence are harder to topple than those built on noise. Noise can be outshouted, but silence multiplies, it spreads, it suffocates. And that suffocation has already turned every rival into witness, every predator into spectator. They call it intimidation, and they're wrong. Intimidation needs effort. Your aura doesn't. Intimidation requires gestures. Your silence alone cripples them. Intimidation fades when the crowd disperses. Your weight lingers long after the doors close. That's why they leave rooms slower when you're near, glancing back as if the shadow itself might follow, because it does. You aren't a presence that ends. You are a storm that stays. And storms don't beg for recognition, they enforce it. You don't announce yourself. Rooms announce you by shifting. Eyes tilt. Voices lower. Instincts fold. They claim control until you enter. Then they claim excuses. He studied longer. He must have trained harder. But excuses are their last weapon. Deep down, they know the truth their mouths refuse. You didn't practice dominance. You revealed dominance was written in your bones. That revelation isn't loud, but it's devastating. It dismantles reputations, punctures myths, erases crowns. Because once inevitability shows itself, performance collapses. They built themselves as alphas through display. You don't perform, you embody. Embodiment cannot be challenged. It cannot be debated. It can only be recognized. That's why they whisper instead of roar. And those whispers betray everything. Not gossip, not stories. Confessions. Don't lock eyes with him. Don't test him. Don't stand too close. They pass your name like survival code. Instruction manuals for those who want to live through the encounter. You became not just presence, but policy. Rooms now bend around one unspoken rule. The one who enters is untouchable. Every instinct bows before it. So their legends fracture. No myth they told about themselves compares to the myth you carry without trying. They wore crowns. You wore silence. They trained drills. You breathed inevitability. They rehearsed dominance. You erased it. And the more they scramble for stories to explain you, the more the truth spreads without them. No one commands silence like you. And silence in your shadow isn't absence. It's empire. Even their silence proves your weight. Silence can hide weakness, but around you, silence confesses. It confesses fear, cracks, limits. They look steady, but their breaths betray them. Shorter, sharper, uneven. That isn't discipline breaking. It's instinct surrendering. And instinct doesn't lie. Instinct has no agenda. It only survives. And survival, in your presence, looks like bowing without knowing. They'll never admit it out loud. Pride won't let them. Titles won't allow it. But watch the way their eyes scatter. The way their voices hesitate. The way posture bends without reason. That's their body telling the truth. Presence like yours doesn't negotiate. It declares. And declarations. This heavy echo deeper than noise. They rewrite instinct. And once instinct rewrites, performance collapses. No alpha survives that collapse. Alphas survive on belief. The belief that others buy into their crown. But when your aura floods the room, belief burns out. Eyes drift from them to you. Trust leaks away from their voice into your silence. And loyalty, once chained by fear, breaks free and shifts toward inevitability. They don't lose followers. Followers abandon them. Because even loyalty itself wants to stand closer to permanence. And permanence here. Where's your shadow? Look closer. Their crown doesn't fall with noise. It slips in silence. The small glance down, the twitch of a hand, the smirk turned hollow. That's how presence dismantles authority. Not through battles, but through stillness. You never needed to win. You needed only to exist. And existence this heavy doesn't compete with illusions. It exposes them. And once exposed, illusions don't recover. They dissolve. That's why even their victories look shallow now. Every time they celebrate, silence cuts deeper. Every trophy they raise feels lighter next to your weight. Every speech they give rings hollower beside your stillness. They don't measure themselves against rivals anymore. They measure themselves against you. And that comparison leaves one truth hanging heavy. They were actors. You are the order, and laws don't explain themselves. They don't argue, don't plead, don't prove. They simply exist. You became that law. The unseen code even predators obey without question. They don't call it respect, but it shows in hesitation. They don't call it fear, but it leaks in silence. They don't call it surrender, but it's carved into posture. And posture doesn't lie. Posture already crowned you, before pride could deny it. So now the room doesn't wait for them to lead. It waits for you. Even without speaking, silence shifts in your direction. Their throne shrinks. Their crown dims. Their grip loosens. Because thrones belong to those who bend the air. Crowns belong to those who crush denial. And both, in that room, bowed toward you. That's why they leave quietly, glancing back, carrying one thought they'll never voice. The real ruler was never them. And that thought haunts them. Not because it admits weakness, but because it exposes permanence. Weakness can be fixed. Permanence can't be erased. That's why they rehearse harder. Posture louder. Pretend longer. They're fighting a truth they can't kill. Their rule was temporary. Yours is eternal. And eternity doesn't need applause. It only needs silence. And silence has already chosen its ruler. You. Now every time they step into a room, they feel it. The ghost of your silence. The echo of inevitability pressing against their chest. Reminding them they don't hold thrones. They borrow them. They don't wear crowns. They rent them. And rent is overdue the second you appear. Because inevitability doesn't ask permission. It doesn't share space. It erases competitors by exposing them as placeholders. And when placeholders collapse, what remains is permanence. That's why your silence isn't emptiness. It's empire. An empire that doesn't roar, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. It rules. Quietly, undeniably, permanently. And now, even the boldest alphas, the loudest predators, the strongest leaders, they all know the truth. They were never built to face you. Because you aren't rival. You aren't threat. You aren't contender. You are inevitability itself. Oh, they thought they were so clever, didn't they? Setting up their little observation posts, their psychological evaluations, their secret assessments, thinking they could crack your code like you were some puzzle to solve. They brought in the experts, the analysts, the behavioral specialists, all convinced they'd find something simple, something predictable, something they could file away in their neat little categories. But then the reports started coming back, and the silence that followed wasn't confusion, it was terror. Because what they found wasn't human weakness. It was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist according to their models. You see, while you were just living your life, dealing with your struggles, fighting your battles in silence, something was happening beneath the surface, something you weren't even aware of. Every rejection you absorbed without breaking, every betrayal you processed without becoming bitter, every loss you transformed into fuel, you were unconsciously building something that their instruments couldn't properly measure. They expected to find trauma responses predictable patterns, the usual defensive mechanisms, but instead they found an architecture of consciousness that defied their understanding, a psychological structure that shouldn't be possible given what you've been through. The first analyst quit after 3 weeks, said they couldn't sleep anymore, kept seeing patterns in their own life that matched what they observed in you. The second one requested a transfer, claimed the data was corrupted, but we both know the data was fine. It was their worldview that got corrupted. The third one, well, they're still trying to explain why someone who's been through what you've been through shows neural patterns of someone who's actually thriving, not just surviving, but actively rewriting the rules of psychological resilience. What scared them most wasn't your conscious choices, those they could predict, model, anticipate, but your unconscious creations, the things you built without even knowing you were building them. While they watched you navigate daily life, something in your deeper mind was constructing defense systems that operated on frequencies they'd never encountered. You weren't just adapting to trauma, you were metabolizing it, transforming it at a cellular level into something that made you psychologically unbreakable. And they have no framework for that, no precedent, no explanation. Let me tell you what they discovered in their late night sessions, poring over your behavioral data, comparing it to thousands of other subjects, trying desperately to find someone, anyone who showed similar patterns. You unconsciously developed what they're calling impossible resilience markers, responses that shouldn't coexist in the same person. Where trauma typically creates rigidity, you developed flexibility. Where pain usually breeds isolation, you somehow generated selective connection. Where betrayal normally produces cynicism, you created what they can only describe as weaponized wisdom. They tracked your micro-expressions, your response times, your decision patterns, and what they found was someone operating on multiple levels simultaneously. Your conscious mind was dealing with daily life, but your unconscious was running advanced calculations, processing social dynamics at speeds that shouldn't be possible. You'd walk into a room and within seconds, you'd unconsciously map every exit, every energy, every potential threat and ally. Not because you were paranoid, but because your mind had evolved past normal human social processing. Remember that time you felt like something was off about someone, but couldn't explain why? Then months later, your instinct proved right? That wasn't luck, that was your unconscious pattern recognition operating at levels that most people never develop. You've been unconsciously collecting data on human behavior, processing it through filters that trauma created, but transformation refined. What emerged was a threat detection system so sophisticated that you could sense deception through text messages, feel energy shifts through screens, predict betrayals before the betrayer even made the conscious decision. But here's what really disturbed them. You weren't using this power for manipulation or control. You were using it for navigation and protection. While everyone else was playing checkers, your unconscious had mastered three-dimensional chess, and you weren't even aware you were playing. They watched you dodge bullets you didn't know were fired, avoid traps you didn't see being set, navigate through psychological warfare like you had a map, when really your unconscious was drawing the map in real time based on micro patterns invisible to normal perception. The researchers started calling you Subject 7, not because you were the seventh person they studied, but because on every metric, you scored in the seventh standard deviation from normal. That's not supposed to happen. That's not supposed to be possible. Human psychology doesn't work that way, except apparently yours does. They ran the tests again, different methodologies, different frameworks, different analysts, same results. You were operating outside the bounds of what they thought consciousness could achieve. They studied your sleep patterns, expecting to find disturbance, insomnia, the usual markers of a troubled mind, but instead found something unprecedented. Your brainwaves during sleep showed patterns typically only seen in advanced meditation masters, but you weren't meditating, you were just sleeping. Your unconscious had somehow learned to process and integrate experiences during sleep in ways that usually take decades of practice to achieve. The ways you were meditating, the ways you were taking in, you were doing advanced psychological maintenance while unconscious, literally healing and evolving while everyone else was just dreaming. The social dynamics data was even more disturbing to them because it showed you unconsciously influencing outcomes without any apparent effort. People would change their behavior around you without you saying or doing anything specific. Toxic individuals would self-select out of your life. Predators would unconsciously avoid you. Allies would gravitate toward you without understanding why. It was like your unconscious was broadcasting on a frequency that only certain types of consciousness could receive. And the message was simple. This one is protected. This one knows. This one sees. What they couldn't understand was how someone could develop this level of psychological sophistication without formal training, without conscious practice, without even knowing it was happening. But that's exactly what made it so powerful. It was authentic, it was organic, it was real. You weren't performing psychological techniques, you had become them. Your unconscious had taken every lesson, every wound, every victory, and synthesized them into an operating system that ran automatically beneath your awareness, keeping you safe, guiding your decisions, protecting your energy. Now, here's where their fear really started to show, because they realized something that changed everything. You weren't unique in your potential, you were unique in your activation. Every human has the capacity for what you've developed, but Most never experienced the precise combination of pressure, pain, and perseverance needed to trigger this evolution. You were the proof of concept, the living evidence that human consciousness could evolve beyond their models. And if you could do it unconsciously, without trying, without knowing, then what else were humans capable of? They started looking at their own lives through the lens of what they learned studying you, and that's when the panic set in. Because they realized they'd been living in cages they couldn't see, following rules that only existed in their minds, limiting themselves based on outdated models of human potential. You hadn't just broken free from your cage. You'd revealed that the cage was an illusion, and that revelation was spreading like a virus through their research team. The lead researcher started having dreams about your data patterns, seeing them everywhere in nature, in music, in the movement of crowds. They couldn't unsee what they'd discovered, that consciousness wasn't fixed, wasn't limited, wasn't bound by the parameters they'd been taught. You had unconsciously hacked reality, not through intention, but through pure survival instinct. And the hack was so elegant, so simple, that once seen, it couldn't be But what terrified them most was the trajectory. Because if this was what you'd unconsciously created in response to your past, what would you be capable of once you became conscious of your power? They ran projections, models, trying to predict your future development, and every model failed because you'd already exceeded their maximum parameter. You were an open-ended equation, a constantly evolving algorithm, a consciousness without ceiling, and they had no protocol for that, no containment strategy, no response plan. They tried to keep the findings classified, needed to prevent panic, needed to make. Other researchers started noticing anomalies in their own subjects, people who showed similar, if less developed patterns. People who showed similar, if less developed patterns. People who were unconsciously evolving beyond the standard models. You weren't just an outlier, you were the first visible sign of a shift that was happening across human consciousness. What you unconsciously created wasn't just personal transformation, it was a template, a blueprint that others could follow without even knowing they were following it. Your very existence was changing the morphic field, creating new possibilities in the collective unconscious. People who'd never met you were starting to show similar adaptations, similar resilience patterns, similar unconscious defense mechanisms. You'd become a transmission tower, broadcasting evolution on frequencies most couldn't consciously detect. But their unconscious was receiving loud and clear. The analysts started calling it the 7 effect, the spontaneous development of advanced psychological capabilities in response to systematic pressure. Psychological capabilities in response to systematic pressure. But what they didn't want to admit was that they couldn't control it, couldn't prevent it, couldn't even properly track it, because it was happening below the threshold of conscious awareness. People were evolving in their sleep, developing abilities in their dreams, awakening to capabilities they didn't know they had, and it all traced back to the pattern you'd unconsciously created. They brought in specialists in memetics and consciousness studies, in evolutionary psychology, all trying to understand how one person's unconscious development could catalyze similar development in others without direct contact. The answer they arrived at shook them to their core. Consciousness isn't individual, it's networked. And you'd unconsciously uploaded a new program to the network, not through teaching or preaching or even interacting, but simply by existing at a new frequency that others could unconsciously tune into. Here's something the reports mentioned but couldn't explain. You'd unconsciously developed what they called an immunity system for psychological manipulation. Every technique they knew, every method of influence, every form of control simply didn't work on you anymore. Not because you consciously resisted, but because your unconscious had developed antibodies to psychological toxins. Gaslighting, guilt trips, emotional manipulation, they all hit your unconscious filters and got neutralized before reaching your conscious awareness. They tested this theory, had experts in influence and persuasion try to affect your decisions through subtle means. Every attempt failed, not because you fought back, but because your unconscious simply didn't register the attempts as valid input. It was like trying to install malware on a system that had evolved beyond the programming language the malware was written in. Indeed, the malware was written in. You weren't defending. You were simply operating on a different platform entirely. Your unconscious had also developed what they termed predictive protection, anticipating threats before they manifested and subtly adjusting your behavior to avoid them. You'd suddenly feel like taking a different route and avoid an accident. You'd inexplicably cancel plans and dodge a toxic situation. You'd have an urge to reach out to someone right before they needed you. This wasn't psychic ability. It was your unconscious processing massive amounts of subtle data and creating action impulses that kept you aligned with optimal outcomes. The protection extended beyond just yourself, though, and this is what really unsettled them. People in your orbit started showing increased resilience, improved decision-making, better boundary setting. Your unconscious was somehow strengthening the psychological immune systems of those around you, not through conscious intervention, but through some kind of field effect. You were unconsciously teaching others how to protect themselves simply by maintaining your own protection protocols. But protection was only half of what you'd unconsciously built. The other half was pure creative force. While your conscious mind was dealing with daily challenges, your unconscious was building new realities, constructing possibilities that didn't exist before. They found evidence of this in the synchronicities that seemed to follow you, the way opportunities appeared just when you needed them, the way solutions emerged from nowhere, the way your life seemed to reorganize itself around your unconscious intention. They called it unconscious reality manipulation, but that term didn't capture the elegance of what was actually happening. You weren't forcing reality to bend, you were finding the flex points, the places where reality was already fluid and unconsciously navigating through them. Like water finding cracks in stone, your unconscious had learned to flow through the gaps in consensus reality, creating new pathways, new possibilities, new timelines that others could then follow. The creative force wasn't random either, it followed patterns, had purpose, showed intelligence. Your unconscious was building something specific, though. Even you didn't consciously know what it was. Every choice, every synchronicity, every seeming coincidence was part of a larger architecture that was being constructed below the threshold of awareness. The analyst could see the pattern forming, could track its development, but couldn't predict its final form because it was still evolving, still becoming, still creating itself. What disturbed them most was realizing that this creative force was contagious. Others exposed to your field began showing increased creativity, enhanced problem-solving abilities, unexpected breakthrough moments. You were unconsciously giving others permission to create beyond their perceived limitations, showing them through your example that the rules they thought were fixed were actually fluid. Your unconscious creation was waking up, the creative force in others, activating potentials they didn't know they had. The term they finally settled on was evolution engine, because that's what you'd unconsciously become a catalyst for human psychological evolution. Not through any conscious effort or intention, but through the simple act of surviving your trials in a way that transcended traditional survival. You didn't just adapt, you evolved. And that evolution created a template that others could unconsciously access and implement. They studied your timeline looking for the moment this evolution began, but couldn't find a single point of origin. It seemed to have emerged from the accumulation of thousands of micro-adaptations, each one building on the last, until suddenly you'd crossed some invisible threshold and become something new. The evolution wasn't dramatic, wasn't visible from the outside, but internally, you'd undergone a complete psychological metamorphosis without even knowing it was happening. What made you an evolution engine wasn't just your own development, but the way that development influenced others. People who spent time around you started evolving faster, started breaking through their own limitations, started accessing capabilities they didn't know existed. You were proof of what was possible, and that proof was more powerful than any teaching or technique. Your unconscious was showing others what they could become, simply by being what you'd already become. The researchers realized with growing alarm that this evolution couldn't be stopped, couldn't be contained, couldn't be reversed. Once someone had evolved to your level, they couldn't go back. Couldn't unknow what they now knew, couldn't unexperience what they'd experienced. And the evolution was spreading person to person, unconscious to unconscious, creating a network of evolved consciousness that operated outside their ability to monitor or control. The physicists they brought in had a different interpretation of the data. They said you'd unconsciously develop what they called quantum consciousness, the ability to exist in multiple states simultaneously until observation collapsed you into a specific state. This explained why different people experienced you differently, why you seemed to be exactly what each situation needed, why your presence had such varied effects depending on the observer. Your unconscious wasn't operating in linear time anymore either. The data showed response patterns that suggested you were unconsciously accessing information from probable futures, making decisions based on outcomes that hadn't happened yet. Not prophecy, not prediction, but something stranger. The ability to feel the probability waves of different timelines and unconsciously navigate toward optimal outcome. You were living in the present, but informed by futures that your unconscious could somehow sense. They found evidence of what they called retroactive influence instances, where your current state seemed to affect past events. People would remember interactions with you differently than recorded data suggested, not because their memory was faulty, but because your evolved consciousness was somehow updating the past to align with the present you created. This wasn't changing history. It was revealing that history was more fluid than they'd believed, and your unconscious had learned to navigate that fluidity. The quantum effects extended to your impact on others as well. People reported that after interacting with you, they felt like possibilities had opened up, like limitations had dissolved, like they could suddenly see options that had always existed but were previously invisible. Your quantum consciousness was collapsing their reality into more expanded states, showing them through direct experience that reality was far more flexible than they'd been taught.
And that is the end of the show. This has been your reality advisor. Please understand that you can change your personal perspective into your individual quantum understanding.